Bad urban planning is to blame for the failure of Muppet Vision 3D. There, I said it. It might be a bold statement, but it's a working theory I've had for a couple of years, and today I'm going to prove it to you. Welcome back to our channel. I am Mouselet2 from the Mouselets, and each week for Mouselets Monday, my sister and I bring you deep dives on some of the most interesting Disney topics. Disney history, Disney news, or Disney conspiracy theories like this one. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure to check back every Monday for Mouselets Monday. But now, let's get into it. If you're still watching, you might be thinking, what the heck am I talking about? Well, what I'm talking about, and I'm sorry to break this news to you if you don't know it already, is that Muppet Vision 3D and Muppet Courtyard are permanently closed. It just happened like a week ago. Disney has decided to retheme this area instead to Monsters, Inc. But of course, Disney has never given us a reason, and they never will give us a reason that they're closing Muppet Vision 3D or the Muppet Courtyard. Typically, what they'll say when they make a change in the parks is that, the parks are always changing. That's what Walt said, and it is so true. The parks always need to progress and change to keep drawing guests in. But the actual reason for Muppet Vision 3D closing could have been predicted years ago, and it's all related to the urban planning of the Hollywood Studios theme park. For reference, the reason I feel qualified to speak on this is I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering with a concentration in urban planning. My full-time job has urban planning involved, but also it's just a massive passion of mine, especially as it relates to Walt Disney World, and especially as it relates to my favorite park in the entire world, Hollywood Studios. And so let's dive into how bad urban planning killed Muppet Vision 3D and Muppet Courtyard. And to understand this, we need to go back in time to the very beginning of Hollywood Studios. When this park first opened, it was very, very small, not at all what it is today. So here's what the park contained. It had Hollywood Boulevard right when you walked in. This sort of served as the Main Street USA of the park. It had the Studio Gate Arch to the right, which is cool. I never knew it was called that. And that's where the animation courtyard is today. And it had a section, at least this is the map was calling it, I don't know, called Theme Park. This included the Backlot Annex, the Lakeside Circle, which is Echo Lake, and then the Backstage Studio Tour. The Backstage Studio Tour is what basically took up about half of the park, at least where guests could see. There was also a working studio on the back lot. So the theme park side was much, much smaller. And so the area that Star Tours is today, that was the Backlot Annex. And it's important to know in the early days of the park that this was a dead end. Star Tours wasn't there. You basically walked up there and there was nothing beyond there. No Star Tours, no Grand Avenue, no Muppets. The park opened in 1989, and 1 year later, we already saw an expansion. That's when Star Tours was added. But beyond this, although the backlot is really close to Star Tours, there was no connection. And that's because the backlot tour was a little bit different at that time. Guests actually used to go on the formal backlot tour in the New York streets area, but eventually Disney changed that. And that was actually just 1 year after this, so in 1991. 1991 is our critical year here, because in addition to the changes that happened to the backlot tour, which opened up the streets of America, we actually saw Jim Henson's Muppets come to the park. And I actually have a deep dive, one of the first ones I did on this channel, that I talk about the long lost lands of Hollywood Studios. That included the Muppet Land that they were going to build with a great Muppet ride. It included the Roger Rabbit Land they were going to build where Rock and Roller Coaster is today, Mickey's Movie Land, and more. So if you want to learn more about why they didn't build that entire Muppet Land, I'm going to link that deep dive here because it is super fascinating. But the long story short is that Jim Henson passed away. His family kind of got cold feet about having Disney have the Muppets, and so they mostly pulled out. We were actually lucky to even get Muppet Vision 3D. And so not by choice, but Disney had to scale back on the big plans they had for the Muppets. And so what we ended up with in this expansion were Muppet Vision 3D, the Stage 1 company store, Jim Henson's Muppets on Location, which was a Muppet meet and greet, the Studio Showcase, which quickly became the Christmas store, and then Mama Melrose's Restaurant Italiano, which, hot take, worst restaurant on Disney property. Glad that one's closed. But the key thing to know here is that Muppet Vision 3D and the surrounding area was fully integrated with the park. Guests would come in from all sides of this land, the front, the back, the side, to pass through the area. There was a stage right nearby. It initially had Beauty and the Beast in 1993 and 1994. Then it had the Spirit of Pocahontas show in 1995, and eventually Papa Mouselet, my dad's favorite, the Hunchback show in 1996. And so this theater exited out right by the back of the Muppet area, and so it was so easy for guests to make their way into the Muppet Land, go into the stores, check out the restaurant, and check out Muppet Vision 3D. And it got even more popular in 1997 when they decided to open up a brand new pizza restaurant, Pizza Planet from Toy Story. Random, not sure why they chose to build that there, and it also wasn't themed like Pizza Planet from the movie. Disney, can we please get a Pizza Planet themed like Pizza Planet from the movie? But I digress. They brought in Pizza Planet, that brought even more people to this land. And we need to focus on the two different types of guests here, because this is really going to get into the failure of the land. There are the guests who are making the Muppets their destination. They're looking at a map and they're saying, Muppet Vision 3D, and they walk there knowing that's where they want to go. And that type of guest has always existed and will always exist with certain attractions. But the key kind of demographic here is the pass-by guest. The pass-by guest is someone who might have exited the Hunchback show, cut through and said, oh, let me go into Muppet Vision 3D. Or the pass-by guest is someone who's wandering the streets of America and sees a big Muppet balloon and says, that looks interesting, let me go on in. This is super important to actually helping fill the theater. So 1996, 1997, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, things were looking pretty good, but obviously we know in 2001 there was a massive drop in tourism that was related to 9/11. And that shaped a lot of things at Disney. It shaped the fact that they abandoned Pop Century. I have a deep dive on that. It shaped the fact that they canceled a lot of projects, they closed a lot of things. And whether related or not, the Hunchback of Notre Dame show closed in 2002. And Disney did not have a replacement slated for this show. And that's why I think it might be related to that drop in tourism. And so things started to change just a little bit. They ended up fully enclosing that theater instead of that open air theater style, and they renamed it to the Premier Theater. Oddly enough, there was never another long running show in here again. They used it for various special events. They used it for Star Wars weekends and eventually for the first year of the Frozen sing-along, but we'll get to that in a moment. And so this entire area got a little quieter. Not too quiet, but a little bit quieter. Disney was still doing things to bring guests into this area. They added a Phineas and Ferb meet and greet at one point, so it was still relatively highly trafficked. And just for reference, that Phineas and Ferb meet and greet was in front of the apartments building, which is like deep Disney lore for me because I always wondered what that was. You could see it like peeking over the walls of Muppet Courtyard, but again, we'll get to that in a minute. I need to stay on track. So now the year is 2014, 2015, and Disney reorients their map. I feel the need to acknowledge that because I was momentarily very, very confused as what was going on. So Frozen starts up in the Premier Theater just for 1 year. Lights, motor, action in the backlot, that's still going on. And really, in many ways, traffic has never been higher in the general Streets of America area. But that was very, very short-lived because just 1 year later, the Premier Theater was permanently closed. The year following, in 2017, the entire backlot was closed. Lights, Motors, Action was closed. The Honey, I Shrunk the Kids playground was closed. And of course, we know why they closed the backlot. It was to make way for Toy Story Land, which opened in 2018, and Galaxy's Edge, which opened in 2019. And with this expansion, they really had to kind of entirely redo the park. Because part of the importance of Galaxy's Edge was having incredible sight lines, having a fully immersive land. I have a deep dive in Galaxy's Edge if you want to watch that. But in terms of having a fully immersive land, they needed to have these certain entrance kind of portals that really helped set the stage for where you were walking into. They also didn't want you seeing Tower of Terror from inside of Galaxy's Edge. It wouldn't fit thematically. And so what they decided to do was build a massive berm around Galaxy's Edge. And that berm and that decision of where they put Galaxy's Edge and where they put Toy Story Land killed the Muppets. Because as they closed the backlot area, so they closed the Streets of America, they needed to do something with the stores and the restaurant and Muppet Vision 3D. But they no longer had a connection in the back of it. Sorry, let me briefly interject to say that the 2020 map has yet again been flipped upside down in case you were confused. So they decided to create a new land. In theory, a really good idea, a Muppet Land, almost like what we always wanted. With a Muppet-themed pizza restaurant instead of Pizza Planet, and the Muppet Vision 3D show in the store, this could work. But in practice, this did not work. Because now, during this kind of construction period, when they closed the entirety of Streets of America, the only way to get into the Muppet Courtyard was a little pathway over by Star Tours, which means that those pass-by guests had totally disappeared. The only people going here were ones looking for food or going to Muppet Vision 3D, and the stores really suffered for this. Now, the following year, Disney actually reopened a tiny, tiny fragment of the Streets of America. That's what we know as Grand Avenue today. They actually even reuse the Streets of America facades, which I think is super cool. And this tiny stretch of the Streets of America, Grand Avenue, opened up a main entrance of the Muppet Courtyard. But it never reopened a second entrance. And then eventually Toy Story Land opened and Galaxy's Edge opened, and there still was only one entrance into the Muppet Land. And while Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story Land brought a huge amount of guests into the park, and it was a really, really smart idea of Disney to add these super popular IPs, the way that they planned it just absolutely destroyed the park. And as like a Hollywood Studios loyalist, I will never get over this. Because if there's anything that is really a terrible idea in any form of city planning, urban planning, anything, it's dead ends. Dead ends are ineffective. They cut off pedestrians who might be walking through. A business sees so much less traffic because no one's going down a dead end road and turning around. And Disney knows this. They do, because when they created Pandora, they didn't want it to be a dead end land that you could only get to passing over one bridge. They actually created a connection to Africa. There's beautiful walkways along the back. So they knew that a dead end with Pandora would make it really suffer. The other thing that can kind of solve a dead end is having a huge e-ticket type attraction. Thunder Mountain at Magic Kingdom, functionally a dead end, but it has that big e-ticket attraction. It does also have the train, but that really brings people over there. And now we know that they're extending Thunder Mountain, so that's all going to change anyway. But Disney knows generally that a dead end is just not going to be good for that. So let me know why, when they were planning Hollywood Studios and this renovation, they created so many dead ends. Hollywood Studios is just a dead end park. First off, we have Sunset Boulevard. I'm not going to count this one as much as a dead end because there's so many things to see and do here. At the end of it, you have what Disney calls a weenie, something that people see and they say, I want to go see that. The castle is a weenie. The Tower of Terror is the weenie that I'm talking about here. They also have the Beauty and the Beast show. That's a destination that people want to go see. They also have the Rock and Roller Coaster, another large destination people want to go to. They have stores, they have restaurants, and they have various other smaller attractions there. So I'm not going to call Sunset Boulevard a dead end. But Animation Courtyard is a dead end. Animation Courtyard is a shell of itself, especially after COVID when they had closed so many things. No one really wanders into Animation Courtyard just to mosey around. You go in there if you want to go to the launch bay, or if you want to go to the Disney Junior show, or now if you want to see the Little Mermaid show. But you're not really going to just walk around that area because it dead ends. It's actually dying to be connected to Sunset Boulevard or Toy Story Land, but that's a story for another day. Another dead end that Disney created, and actually possibly the worst one, is Mickey Avenue, which became Pixar Place, which became Municiberg, which I believe now is Pixar Place again. When they reoriented the Toy Story Mania entrance to be in Toy Story Land, they just absolutely killed this tiny stretch of road. They've never been able to find a purpose for this. No one really walks down there. They'll have characters in there sometimes. Edna Mode has a meet and greet. Sully will be there. Frozen will be there. Some of the Incredibles. They tried to do the Incredibles dance party thing, but it's just never been successful because they've completely cut off traffic. I feel like it's worth noting, if you haven't been to Hollywood Studios in a while, that this actually used to connect to the entrance of the Backlot Tour. And so this used to be fully connected to the streets of America, a very high trafficked road. Now it is dead-ended and Disney knows that it's a problem. But the other dead end they created was Muppet Courtyard. But then Disney made it even worse because they closed the studio store, probably because not a lot of guests were going there. They closed the Christmas store, probably because not a lot of guests were going there. They left Mama Melrose's open, but I mean, it was so bad that no one was going there. I'm just kidding. Not really, but I hate Mama Melrose. I know it had its fans, but it's gone now, so I need to stop talking about it. And just to be honest, Muppet Vision 3D was not drawing that same crowd that it used to draw. And so it didn't have the pass-by traffic, and it didn't have that kind of weenie that would draw people in. They took the balloon away that people would see. And so Muppet Vision 3D just started to decline in attendance. So what is Disney to do? Well, they have a land that doesn't have a lot of guests going in it. They're not going to reopen the stores because they clearly weren't making enough money to keep them open. They can't connect the land through the back by that old apartments building by the Phineas and Ferb meet and greet because of the Galaxy's Edge berm. And so they only have one option. If they can't create that pass-by traffic with another entrance, they have to find some way to have a weenie, a destination. And Muppets was not that. But you know what is? A Monsters, Inc. Door Dark ride. A huge Monsters, Inc. factory with a thrill ride, a roller coaster, is certainly going to bring guests into that area. And that's what's happening there. If you don't know, Disney is retheming that entire land. It's now totally walled up into a Monsters, Inc. land. And it's going to be really incredible. But it didn't have to be that way. They could have built that Monsters, Inc. land in Animation Courtyard. And actually, many people, including myself, thought that some of the concept art showed it in Animation Courtyard. And it's possible they were weighing where it needed to go. But the reason they decided on Muppet Courtyard is just because they had a lot of space there that was not being used. And so that is my theory on how Disney's urban planning killed Muppet Vision 3D and the Muppet Courtyard area. Again, Galaxy's Edge, Toy Story Land, the most brilliant things they could have done from this park. I actually love the shift that you are stepping foot into the movies. I think it's super effective. I know not everyone loves that themed kind of change, but I think it is really effective. But what they needed to do was think about the park holistically, think about every single interaction, and not just focus on building one or two incredible new lands. How will this connect? How will people get from point A to point B? And for whatever reason, they did not focus on that, and that's how we ended up with these dead ends, and that's why Hollywood Studios, in many ways, suffers in these other areas. Anyway, so that is my theory. I didn't mention it, but I do want to say that they're retheming Rock and Roller Coaster to the Muppets, so in case you haven't heard the news and you're a huge Muppet fans, there's still going to be a Muppet presence in the parks. It's going to be over by Rock and Roller Coaster. And maybe things would have been different if we had that Muppet land and a great Muppet ride. Maybe that land would have never closed, but unfortunately it did, and that's my theory on why. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel because every single Monday we post deep dives on super interesting Disney topics and sometimes random rants from me of things I think are interesting related to civil engineering, Disney, urban planning. So see you all at the next one, and bye!